These are our life's aha moments from the perspective and experiences of two Christian women who are focused on creating a deeper relationship with Jesus Christ.
Join us as we share and discuss insights we have learned and provide tools to empower you on your journey of intentional creation. Welcome to another episode of Ahas, Awakenings, and Applications. I am Leann.
And I'm Melissa.
Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. We are going to be continuing our conversation on cultivating meaningful connection, specifically through practicing story stewardship. And I've really enjoyed reading about Brenè Brown's definition of story stewardship and what that means. And this is something that I think everybody needs to learn and become better at. And it can feel a little confusing because I kept thinking, well, what about this situation? Or what about that situation? And maybe I'll bring up those situations after we've talked about it a little bit. But it is something that I want to do better at, and I'm still studying and learning to grasp what that actually means and what that looks like for me in my life. And so I wanted to start with her definition of what story stewardship is. And she said, story stewardship means honoring the sacred nature of story, the ones we share and the ones we hear, knowing that we've been entrusted with something valuable or that we have something valuable that we should treat with respect and care. So sometimes I think that when we are speaking or other people are speaking, we're not really putting the value on it that maybe it deserves. And maybe that I'm speaking more for myself, maybe than other people. It's that our words aren't just words to be thrown out into the air, especially when somebody is sharing a story that might be very hard to hear or, uh, just maybe a struggle that somebody is having, and really taking the time to value that story and value that person who is telling this story, or maybe even your own stories as you share.
Right. And I also think also if it's told in confidence, to keep it in confidence.
Yes, yes. And I think also sometimes when I've heard stories from other people about maybe another person, that it's not my information to share. It's not my story to share, is what I often tell myself. This isn't my story to share. Let that person be the one to share if they want or if they don't want. So really trying to be more respectful
Right.
of people in the stories that they have that are happening in their lives. And I like how she explains what a good steward is. So she says, we are good stewards of the stories we tell by trusting them to people who have earned the right to hear them. I really love that.
Yes.
And then only telling them when we are ready to tell them. So sometimes I feel like, have you ever had like one of those friends who kind of pressures you to find out information out of you and you're just like, no, I'm not really ready or I don't want to do that. So I think being respectful of that. She also says we are good stewards of the stories we hear by listening, being curious, affirming, and believing people when they tell us how they experienced something. I think that one is really important. When I haven't had that, I can think of a lot of times when I haven't had that and how that
Right.
felt. I felt just unseen.
I think
And
especially when someone's being very vulnerable and
yes,
sharing something that's really important to them or how they have a lot of emotions about or just feel a lot about, and it's something really special to them or important to them or something that they're going through, to really it's almost like a privilege that they're sharing that with you,
yeah,
and taking that for not taking it for granted, but really realizing how special that is, that that person trusts you enough to say these things, and then taking that and not sharing it with everyone else,
hmm
but stewarding that information in the right way.
Yes. I love just the way she explains so many aspects of this topic.
Mm-hmm.
She has a little graphic that she shares in her book that kind of shows you what that could look like. And
I like the little story, the little comic.
yeah, I just saw
Yes.
myself in that going, oh, wow, I have some work to do because I
Yeah.
do all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been really wanting to do better. So paying attention and catching myself.
Yes. Some of the things that she talks about the near enemy of story stewardship is connection while driving disconnection.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's so interesting how, so one of the things with story stewardship, one of the things she points out is knowing and applying the language of human experience and emotion.
Hmm.
And the near enemy of that is shaping emotion and experience to fit what we know, which we do
Yeah,
all the time, because
we
we
do.
think, oh, I know what that feels like. If someone's sharing an experience or something with us, like, oh, I've experienced that. I felt that. But something that she brings out right off in this section was, she said for years she would tell people that we need to know what the emotions that our other people are feeling, and she goes, no, we don't know what emotions other people are feeling
Yeah,
because
there's no way
there's
we can really know.
no, and there's so many nuances and different ways of feeling and different, we all, because of our own shared and unique experiences, or not shared, but our unique experiences and the things that we've, the road that we've traveled, we're going to see things completely different than anyone else. And we're going to feel completely different than anyone else. So we can't say, oh, because I see this look on that person's face, I know what they're feeling. Or you know, because they've had this experience, I know what they're feeling. Or saying, oh, well, this is how I would feel in that if I was in that situation. But there again, that's, not, that doesn't mean that we know how exactly that person is feeling.
And have you ever heard of those studies where they have a group of people who all witness the same event
Oh,
and they
yes.
each come out telling something different, or many of them have different
Uh-huh.
stories of what they actually saw. And then they
Ah,
replay the video and it's not what people always see. I think that's what
right.
that makes me think of.
Or,
Yeah.
you talk to siblings, that grew up in the same family
Yes.
and had the same experiences, and
Hmm.
they all see it differently and they'll feel about things differently. So,
Yeah. And she talks about that those near enemies, there's a couple of things. There's takeover and there's tap out. So taking
oh,
over is really
yes.
just hijacking their story and making it um, a story of what you feel is important, or making it a competition,
Right.
or just inserting yourself, making it about you.
Hmm.
And so I thought that was really interesting, and which really diminishes that story for them. And then tapping out is just, I can't handle this today. You're not
Hmm.
getting involved in that story at all.
Right. I think that's a huge problem that when we get our egos get involved, and I think a lot of times it's our motivation, what are we being motivated by listening to this conversation or being involved in this conversation? And I think a lot of people, me as well at times, make it about me. Or
Hmm.
the other thing she said was about, knowing is also a near enemy.
Yes.
So like, oh, I've had that experience, so I know, and I can tell you what to do,
Yes.
And
Yes.
that was brought up, especially in that comic that she has at the end.
And I think that's really damaging
It
when
is.
especially if you have some really heavy things happening.
Hmm.
Maybe you've lost somebody, maybe a child or a parent. And when people are like, "Oh, I know how that feels," or just tending to brush that aside, well, you can have more children, or things like that. I think it's so damaging for
Hmm.
people because you're really not validating them. You're not
No.
allowing them to be where they're at. I think
Hmm.
it kind of goes back to that. We've talked about this before, is we don't like to feel uncomfortable. And so I think that's part of why we make it about ourselves. but also, tapping out so we don't have to feel. And I really loved how she brought up, she talked about emotional differentiation. I don't know if you remember that part, but it's the ability to separate our emotions from another person's emotions.
Yes.
And I think that's a great skill to be able to have
Hmm.
so that you're not letting, you can listen to this story and sit in their pain with them, but you don't have to take on that pain as your own.
Right. I thought it was interesting that she said, going back to the knower, she said the issues that most of us struggle with are being the knower, advice giver, and problem solver. Problem solving is tough because some people do want help. But the best stewardship in these moments is to just say, I'm grateful that you're sharing this with me. What does support look like?
Hmm.
I can listen and be with you. I can help you problem solve or whatever else you need me. You tell me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So
I,
what do you need right now?
right.
It's really easy but we don't do that. I don't know anybody
Hmm.
that does that. Truthfully, I don't think I've had that experience very often.
Well, I had an experience last week where I was talking to a friend and she was just kind of dumping on, just telling me all the things that were going on in her life. And I was like, whoa, it was a lot. And I kind of, at first, I was like, oh, I really don't want to be a part of this conversation because I don't feel like I'm in a place where I can give her advice or anything. And then was remembering these things that I just, because I've been focusing on these things and reading about these things. And I was like, okay, all right, what are these principles that I've been learning? How can I use that in this conversation?
Hmm.
And then I just said a prayer. Heavenly Father, what's needed?
Yeah.
What role am I playing right now for her? And I just felt like I just needed to listen. And that's
Hmm.
all she needed was someone to listen. And I didn't do anything else. I shared an experience after she was done talking. And I asked her, I said, I had an experience the other day. Do you want me to share that with you? And she said yes. And so I did. And she goes, thank you for sharing that experience. But I asked her first because I didn't want to just say, oh, I know what your problem is. I know how to solve this problem because I had no idea. But
Right.
um, but just helping, being aware, I think, in that moment and just finding out what she needed.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think that when we try and pretend like we know what they're thinking and
Hmm.
sharing those things, I feel like what we're really doing is um, trying to author the story of that person
Right.
instead of letting them be the author of their own story.
Hmm.
And so, um, as I look at it that way, I don't want to author other people's stories. I
Mm-mm.
want to let people figure things out for themselves and be able to write those own stories. As difficult as they are, those are the things that are going to teach them.
Right.
And
Exactly.
and so um, I think reminding myself of that um, I think will help me in the future to remember my job is to listen
Hmm.
and give them the support that they need in the way that they need. Um, it did create questions though for me, and
Mm.
so I just things to think about. Um, and one of those questions that I had was, and I think this is why the spirit is so important. Being able to say that little prayer and asking God to guide you. But when we have people who are maybe really in the throes of something really difficult and challenging, and if you're asking somebody what they need and they don't know what they need, maybe
Mhm.
they don't know what they're even feeling. Because I know when you're in distress, it's kind of like when you're grieving and people are like, "Well, how can I help you?" And you're like, "I don't know right now. Like, I really have no idea. My brain is not
Mhm.
functioning properly." I think that's where I start to have questions like, you know, I think maybe just holding that person. I guess the thing that comes to my mind is just sitting with that person. And there
Mhm.
doesn't have to be a conversation. It makes me think about a time I had a friend who was grieving. a really horrible loss, and neither one of us could talk. It was just sitting together and just
Mm.
kind of crying together. And so um, I think that is totally okay too.
I think that's really important too, because I think that she also goes into if we don't have the words, if we don't know what we're feeling, then we really aren't ready to heal.
Mm-hmm.
It's when we get to that point where we can put the words, if we have the words, if we have the emotions, then we're ready to heal. But in those for especially after you've lost someone, you're not ready to heal. You've got to there's a process, but to be able to just hold that person, not say anything,
Mm-hmm.
or if it's you just I just need a hug.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a huge part of the healing process as well, to just be
Mm-hmm.
able to give that support in no words. Just I'm
Yes.
here for you.
Yeah.
I'm not here to solve your problems, but I'm just here. I'm going to hold you and know that you're not alone.
Yeah. So this friend, as I think about that, this friend, as she was going through this grieving process, would just call me and she wouldn't say anything. It would just be silence. And I remember I would just say, "Do you need me to come over right now? I'm coming." And it would just be a yes. And I don't know how many times she did that, but I would just drop everything, knowing in my mind that was what she needed at that time. There's so many
Hmm.
things I would have done different back then, if I knew the things then that I know now. But I think I did that part okay. And
Yeah,
I would totally do it again. And if, you know, anybody needed that, I would be ready to be there. And I think that sometimes is all we need is to know that somebody would drop everything for us and come and sit with us in those times that we need it.
I think that gives you that. We've been talking about belonging and you feeling like you belong, that someone is just there for you.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's such a huge need to feel like you're not alone,
Mm-hmm.
and to know that someone's just there and that someone's going to drop something that they're doing and come and be with you
Mm-hmm.
is huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like how she says that tapping out of stewarding someone's story can feel like betrayal. And
Mm,
tapping out of sharing your own story feels like betraying ourselves.
right.
Have you ever felt like you betrayed yourself? I have.
Oh, many times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So I think it's learning, as we learn to use these skills, we can learn to trust ourselves better. Just
Hmm.
practicing and start trusting ourselves and knowing we're going to make mistakes along the way. And there
Yeah.
might be times that we feel like we betrayed ourselves or someone else, but we can always apologize and try to do better and um, just really be ready to focus on other people. I love so many different parts of this. When we think about the gospel, offering that compassion and that charity, um, where we're centering our focus on other people and seeking to be guided by the Spirit and help them in a way that will really truly help them and focus on them. Isn't that so much how our Heavenly Father and our Savior wants to help us with our struggles? And I
Hmm.
think we can learn so much from our Savior and how he treated people. Um,
Yes.
he was a great teacher also, so we can see that he teaches, but that may not always be our job to actually teach at that time. We're not, when we think about this, we're not in that teacher mode. We are in that
Hmm.
listener mode. And how much we can learn as we listen. Just listening
Right.
brings that learning and growth.
But I love how the Savior was so focused on the one.
Hmm.
And he was focused, he met people where they were.
Yep.
You think of that woman that was caught in adultery and she was on the ground, and he went down on his knee and met her where she was.
Hmm.
And it didn't matter all of the people that were around, he was there for her.
Yep. What a
And
great example that is for
yes,
us.
it is.
It really is. I also like how she said that story stewardship is not walking in someone else's shoes.
Yeah.
That's empathy, right?
Hmm.
But story stewardship is not the same thing.
But I love how she said, if you are walking, you're allowing that person to explain how it feels to be in their shoes.
Right,
So you're not taking on that, or you're not trying to feel like what that feels like,
right.
but you're allowing them to explain it.
Yeah. So
Which I
it's
think,
really, go ahead.
I think that goes back to what she said about, when you really can't heal until you can put the emotion to it, until you can understand and have the words to explain what you're feeling. And I think that's a part of it, is that process of coming to that point where you can explain how you're feeling and putting those words to it. Because she talks about, because every single one of these things that we've been talking about, the first one is knowing and applying the language of human experience and emotion. And so that's a part of each one of those sections that we've been discussing, is knowing and applying the language and emotion. And
Hmm.
that's a process. We don't understand when there's so much emotion, because we don't just feel one emotion at a time. We
Right.
feel multitudes of emotions at a time, especially in a really, big thing that's going on, or, whatever it is that's going on. You're feeling a lot of things, and it feels chaotic inside, because you're just like, I couldn't even explain anything that I'm feeling right now because it's just so big.
Hmm.
And so to be able to just have someone listen, or just someone to sit with you, that's the first step. And then as you're able to put a little more language to that, explain that to someone else, that's another step. And it's just that process of taking those steps and being able to express those things through time. That's when healing can happen, because you understand it a little bit more as you explain a little bit more. And to be able to have someone that can listen
Hmm.
and just be there as
Yep.
you, because I know I'm a verbal processor.
Hmm.
And sometimes I just tell my husband, you don't have to fix my problem. I don't want
Yes.
any advice. I just need someone to listen to me, because I just need to get it out of my head. Because what it is in your head, it just kind of like,
Yeah, that processing, being able to speak and get it
yes,
out
yes,
is
mm-hmm,
so valuable and so important, especially when it comes to emotions.
yes,
It's a need that we all have as human
mm-hmm,
beings to express. And I
right,
think those words, it just shows how valuable words are, how
yes,
important they are,
yes,
um, what we're speaking. And having those learning to communicate in
mm-hmm,
in a productive way. These are all ways that we can learn to do better, improve that communication for others. And when we're practicing that with others, we can also be practicing it on ourselves.
mm-hmm,
And because that connection to ourselves is just as important as
mm-hmm,
connection to others.
right. Um, I tell clients a lot, if there's stuff stuck in their throat they
Hmm.
need to say, but they didn't feel like they could say, because sometimes you're like, oh, I don't want to
Yes,
say that to this person, because then, that I'll
we hold back.
be hold back. There's tons of different situations where you don't feel like you can say it. It's not safe. You don't feel like you can. Anyway, just like, if you're in a car by yourself, or in the shower where you can turn on the fan, or in a situation where you're alone, you just, you know, picture that person next with you, and then you can just say whatever you need to say, because it just needs
Yes.
to come out.
Right.
So to
Right.
just to be able, and don't hold back to say everything you need to say. And I had a client once, and she said, when she came back the next time, she said, yeah, I was vacuuming and I just said everything I needed to say. And when I was done vacuuming, I felt so much
Yes.
better.
Absolutely.
And I thought that is so fun. I just love that she just felt really great after that.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that we can get that out.
Hmm. But it's like you said, it's really important to use those words. And I think the more that we can say that, the more that we can express ourselves with words, the more that we understand ourselves.
Yes. And, I think don't let not knowing how to label something, because we've in the past talked about labeling emotions.
Hmm. Hmm.
Don't let that stop you from, just expressing yourself. Like you said, being able to do that on your own when nobody's around. Don't let any of that stop you. Find
Right.
those ways, those places, those times that you can, even if you're just sharing with yourself, but share
Hmm.
it out loud.
Yeah. Something the end of this little comic, I won't go into all of the ways, the because the comic kind of shows different situations and different, showing how the different, an example of the far enemies and the near enemies and so forth. But at the end, of this comic, she kind of goes into the it's like a worker, uh, an employee and a manager type of a situation, and that's something that had happened with that didn't go well, and the employee was feeling really awful, and the manager was like, "Oh, let's go fix it."
Hmm.
you know but I love how she says, um my she says, my gut is we need to address this, but I want you to think about what support looks like for you and how we can do this together, and more importantly, how I can support you doing it.
Hmm.
And I just think that's such a great thing. And she says, in that support can look like whatever you need it to look like. I know how, I'm sorry this happened. I know how good that what your work was, and I know how hard you worked to put it together. And then at the bottom it says, the employee says, I feel seen and heard. I don't feel disempowered, but I took time and took, but it took time and it took her to be introspective. So I think it's taking that time, if we're the one that's listening, to be introspective
Hmm.
and to think, how can I help this person in this situation, or what is my role? I like that idea of what is my role in this situation.
Hmm. Yeah, I think remembering our role is really important so that we aren't taking on this job of trying to save other people or be in charge of other people, because that's
Mhm.
not really most of the time what people even want or need.
Right.
And I do think, you know, she talked about how we don't know what emotions people are really having. And she said, we can just ask, like
Hmm.
ask them, how are you feeling? And so I think we can do the same thing with showing them support. How can I support you? And maybe they won't know. Um, and then I think that's if they really truly aren't ready to maybe be able to express that, it's okay. Let them
Hmm.
be where they are. I think trusting that people are where they're at, because most people don't have the skills to share. And so we can just try and model what we've learned as
Hmm.
we share that with other people and ask. And if they don't know, we can pray about it and do our best efforts to um, help meet those needs.
I think it's also interesting that brings up the word curious, be curious, because I think if you're curious and you ask those questions, and you're not asking the questions to really know the answers, it's asking the questions for them to be able to think.
Yes.
And I find that, when you ask people questions, they come up with solutions on their own.
Yeah,
So you
I
don't have,
agree.
yeah, it's just getting them to think and get out of kind of this loop that you're kind of in, to be
Yes.
able to think a little bit differently.
Hmm.
And when you ask questions, you're like, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way, or that brings up something else, or anyway, just is a great way to think about something in a different way.
Yeah, so it makes me think about a meeting I was at last night, and one of the people, he had brought up a problem that he's had this past year and getting his group of people to activate and do some things. And so he was talking about how this group of people, they do a lot of service, but there's this one area that he can never seem to get enough help with. And he said, I was asking, well, He said, I do this service every month. We have some kind of service. And I'm like, well, who asks you to do this every month? And he's like, well, I do. I'm the one that is trying to do this. And so my thought was, like you have this service that you're asking these people to do every single month, but it's causing you problems because you can't do this other assignment that you've been asked to do, which is giving service too. Everybody feels burnt out from the monthly. Some of the people feel burnt out that they won't give on this other. Um, and so as he was talking about this, I could just see this kind of light bulb going off like, oh, he's the one that can do something about that. He can change the way he's asking these people to give service
Mm,
monthly to make space to do this other assignment that is a major part of what he's asked to do. So I didn't have to say anything, but it was through asking a couple of questions that I think that he was able to see that maybe there was something that he could do to change the way he was
mhm,
asking that. And
mhm,
so I think that's very effective in letting people to come up with those. I don't have to have the solutions for other people's problems at all. And it's not meant for me to do that. So I
mhm,
think that how, that having that wonder,
mhm,
I wonder, I
mhm,
wonder why. Wonder why
mm.
this is happening, or, and I don't have to create a story. I could just, ask these guided questions that maybe will be helpful for them.
Yeah. I just think that's so interesting. It's all about perspective and how we see things.
Uh-huh. And we may not see it until somebody asks
Um,
us the right question.
exactly.
I think
Because
it's so good to communicate with other people. When you try and do that on your own, like you said, you're a verbal processor. I think a lot of us are verbal processors. Keeping that trapped in your head is kind of not really the best way to
no,
handle those.
but to be able to just talk it out with someone, it helps you change your perspective and see it differently. And
Hmm.
sometimes it's not, I mean, the situation doesn't change.
Hmm.
Nothing changes except for how you're seeing it.
Hmm.
And that makes all the difference.
It's all about our perspective anyway.
Hmm.
It really is.
So true. So I think this isn't really about the story stewardship, but kind of the stories that we create.
Yes.
The stories that we've lived over and over and over that we keep recreating and how we
Yes.
can create something different by getting out of the old stories. It's just another way of seeing patterns, but it's like getting out of the old story. We don't have to believe it anymore.
Hmm.
And
And
seeing it
how
from a different perspective can change our story, you know?
it's so true, and how much that can get you out of that place of feeling stuck,
Hmm.
or just really when you want to make those changes, maybe try and look at it a different way. Another thing that I was questioning was I noticed about myself as I was reading this, and she doesn't mention this in her book, Brenè Brown, but I thought about toxic positivity. And I think that kind of see that in that
Oh,
cartoon,
okay. Yeah.
in that effort to be positive all the time. Do we say, oh, it'll be okay? You'll get through this. This won't last forever. Um, you know, that's really invalidating also.
Hmm.
That's,
Hmm.
um, and for a long time, I didn't know that that's what I was doing. But when I had read about that somewhere else, I just thought, oh, yeah, in that effort to be more, to create a more positive environment and atmosphere, I would just bring up the positive side. And, that's not the time or place to do that either. I mean, there is a place for positivity, but it's not when somebody is sharing a difficult story. Not at all.
Yeah.
Actually, I feel like the less we say, the better.
The better. Well, I
And
was
I
a
think
yeah.
that's a good, for me, that's a good reminder that if I don't know what to say, I don't have to say anything. I can just offer hugs. I can say, so sorry, do you want to tell me more? There's
Hmm.
really not a whole lot I have to say.
I was in another situation this past week where it was kind of a heated conversation. I wasn't a part of the conversation. I was just there. And it was kind of uncomfy, but I was just kind of sitting there saying, okay, what is my role? And I just prayed and asked, should I say anything? Should I just let it play out? And that was the spirit, just let it play out.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay. So I was just being there and hoping, was praying for the best outcome, that things would come together and they would be able to see. And it did. But it was kind of a little bit weird at first because I was like, ooh, I wanted to jump in and, try and play the mediator, but the spirit's like, no, this conversation needs to happen. I'm like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
All
Because it
right.
feels unsafe, as we've
Yeah.
talked about. It's
Yeah.
uncomfortable. Confrontation can
Hmm.
feel uncomfortable.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But it wasn't my conversation and it wasn't my
Yeah.
situation. And so it wasn't for me to do anything,
Mm-hmm.
although I
Yeah.
really wanted to because I was uncomfortable. But see, that was for me. I wanted
Yeah.
to feel comfortable. I wanted it to be okay so that I
Yeah.
would feel more comfortable. So I was trying to make it about me. And it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't about me at all.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm really grateful for learning these principles and being able to have these opportunities to apply them. And I
Yeah.
know that I'm not going to be perfect at it.
Mm-hmm.
Take time to learn, but I'm willing to learn that because I really think this is important, especially in our day. Um, it's just going to be even more important as things get, I don't know, just life in this world right now is interesting. So,
With everything that's happening in people's
mm,
lives, it's a good
right.
skill to have for sure.
Hmm.
Well, should we come up with an invitation for our listeners?
Yeah.
I'm feeling like maybe we just need to invite our listeners to look for those ways that they can offer better story stewardship. Maybe recognize, um, are you being curious? Are
Mm-hmm.
you asking people what they need when they take the time to share?
Yeah.
So maybe just notice how you're responding. And
Yeah. And is it more for them or is it more for you?
yeah, are you inserting yourself,
Hmm.
making it about you? I do it all the time.
I know. Reading through all these things, I'm like, oh
I
man, I
know.
have a lot of work to do.
I
I
must
do
sound
that.
ridiculous. That's what I was thinking. Well, thank you,
But
Melissa. I have really enjoyed talking about this topic.
yes, it's been wonderful. Join us for our next episode as we discuss Elder Suarez's talk about the virtue of temperance, examples from the scriptures and latter-day prophets, and how temperance can shape our responses to negativity. If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow or share with others so we are easier to find. Check out our show notes for each episode in your podcast app or YouTube, and join us on Instagram for more daily content at Awakenings Podcast.